Morning YouTube. So today I'm going to be throwing together a quick tutorial video on how to create new VMs in Oracle VM VirtualBox. Now the Oracle VM software is a not necessarily a replacement but an alternative to VMware. The great part about Oracle VM is that it's free and open source, whereas VMware is extremely costly. Now me personally, I kind of do this just at home. I don't run a full-size data center, so I don't feel the need to spend thousands of dollars on VMware. So we're going to go through it start to finish. I'll show you a couple tips and tricks in the way I like to do things. This is one of my production servers. I have several of these running. This is one of my smaller ones, and so it only has a couple VMs that run on it at any one time. But I'll show you how to configure it, how to set it up, how to install it, and then how to remote into it once you've created it and it's running on its own server. So we're going to open up the Oracle VM VirtualBox software. I already have a couple VMs created here. We're going to go ahead and create a new one, so I'm going to do this as if it were start to finish. So we're going to create a new one. We'll name it Tests 1. We are going to select Windows, and here you can select a variety of operating systems. You can run Mac software, Apple software, OS X 10, and I'm not sure what other versions there are, but you can run Mac software on a PC, as well as Linux, Solstice, and of course Microsoft Windows. So we're going to be running Windows. I'm going to be running, we'll say Windows 7 64-bit because I know I have an ISO built for it. The memory size, we're going to set this up to, we'll say 4 gigs because I know the installer package is about 3 gigs. So this is where you dictate how large, this is your memory allocation from your RAM, and then we'll create the virtual disk later on. So we'll create a virtual disk now and click create. Here is where we determine how big the hard drive is essentially on your VM. So this is taking a pool of all the available drives in your server in whatever RAID configuration you have it set up in. So it has a big pool that it can pick out of. So you can say how large you want each of these machines. So we're going to step this down to we'll say 3.6 gigs roughly. We're going to create a virtual box disk image. We want it dynamically allocated. So what this is when one of your VMs is off, it will reallocate a portion of this file size that you've dictated to another VM. It will put it back into the pool for other servers to run from. So if you're kind of limited on space that you have on your server, but you want a whole bunch of VMs and they're not running all at the same time, you can set this to be dynamically allocated to where it can shift around the resources as it needs to. Or you can do fixed size, which takes a chunk out of the pool and strictly dedicates it to your particular VM that you're creating. So we want it dynamically allocated. We're going to click create. So here's our new Windows 7 machine, and here's your general configuration. From here you can go into settings, and this is where you can kind of tweak everything. A couple of the things that you'll want to double check is go into the system tab. This is where you can share resources from your server. So we can share an optical drive, which is a CD-ROM drive that's on your server. You can share hard disks, network drives, which this is useful if you host like a server or application sharing on a network drive. This is where you would enable that. And here's where we can dynamically adjust our base memory for this server. So here we have the processors, and we can select how many CPUs we want. In my instance, I'm running several quad cores, so I can tell it how many cores I want this to use or how many CPUs I want this to use. And then our execution capacity, this is where you can limit the bandwidth of how much it can use of each processor. Acceleration, we're going to leave this alone because I don't do nesting and I don't have a high-end graphics card, a GPU, to be able to enable hardware acceleration. So display, this is where we set our video memory. This will change depending on what you're doing with this VM, and you'll need to kind of figure out what you want to do with it. Monitor count, this is where we can enable multiple monitors. Remote display, you'll want to enable this if you want to be able to remote into the server once it's up and running as a VM. Video capture, this is, if you deem it necessary. I don't use it on mine. So this is where we create our drives. This is our test VDI, so this is our drive allocation. And then our CD-ROM, which is currently empty. We have audio, networking, and several options for this. I always set mine to NAT, and that's just how I have my network configured, which I'm not going to go into. Serial ports, if you want to share a serial port or serial port card that's in your server, you can do that here. Same thing with USB. If you have a USB dongle or a USB flash drive, anything plugged into your server, you can share it here so that your VM can also utilize it. Shared folders, this is where you'd add your network folders, and then just a little bit of user information. So everything looks good for me, so we're going to power it up under normal start. And then here it's going to ask you where your operating system is. So it's asking you please select the virtual optical disk file or physical optical drive. So this is what it's looking for is a Windows disk or whatever installation disk, Mac installation disk, Linux, Ubuntu, Unix, whatever operating system you're installing. This is where it wants to find it. So by default, it's going to look for your D drive on the server, which is your optical drive on your server. What I've done, I've went through and got all my software that I have, and I've created ISOs of it so that I can not only back up my CDs so I don't have to constantly use the CDs every time I want to install it, but if I want to use an operating system to be able to spin up a VM quickly, I can go in here. Let's say I want to install Windows 7 Professional. I have that ISO already created, which is a clone of the original installation disk. So I can click OK, click Next, or click Start. It's going to start the VM, and then it's going to go in through the Windows installation. I'm not sure how long this is going to take to do. But from here, it's exactly as you would install it on any other computer. If you're installing Windows 7 or Linux or whatever it is, the installation process is exactly the same. It sees no difference in terms of how it manages the system, because to you or to anything else in your system, once you've created this VM, it's essentially a hardware computer that resides on another computer. And I know that's kind of confusing, but once you get into the world of VMs, they're really interesting to play with. So I think this is going to take a while because it's going to do the full hardware installation, and I didn't allocate a ton of processors or memory to this. So I'm going to shut this machine down, power off, just because I don't need another Windows 7 machine. Now I'm going to delete this machine and delete all the files. Another quick tip you can do if you spin up a lot of VMs is once you've created one, like this Windows 7 Pro machine I have here, this is essentially a template that I've created for Windows 7 Pro. The only thing on it is the basic installation with the COA. It's activated, the Windows version is activated, and it's configured essentially how I want to clone a machine. So if I wanted to replicate another Windows 7 Professional machine, just to get it spun up quickly, I can right click on it and go to clone. I can click next. I want a full clone, and then you click clone. It will create an exact image of what you currently have, and so you spin up another Windows 7 Pro virtual machine within a matter of minutes versus probably an hour if you installed it manually. So that's it for creating it. Another thing I'm going to show you real quick is how to access the VMs once they're created. So what I like to do once your VM is created and programmed and you have everything you want running, once you have everything you want created on it, and it's built and ready to go, what I like to do is go to headless start, because if you go to normal start, it's going to try and open up a separate window here, and it's going to try and run the entire operating system. What headless start does is it starts the machine, and you can see the preview here in the window, but it doesn't open another console to that machine. And then once it's running in headless start, we can go to show, and I'll show you why this is important here in a second. Once you start the VM, for some reason, I think it's something to do with this Oracle VM software, you do have to log into it manually the first time, and then you just close the machine out and leave it running in the background, which will allow you to remote into it from any other machine on your network. So we have our Windows XP machine running here, and I have several Windows XP machines because I have some older software that won't run on Windows 7 or 10. So I need to have these XP machines available, but I don't want a bunch of hardware machines hanging around on my network. So once we've logged in, we can close it. We're going to continue running in the background, and then we can minimize our remote desktop session that's into our server. We open up a new remote desktop session, and I want to remote into the computer name, which is named Flexi. And there we go. This is my virtual machine that is running on my server. Let me open up that one. So this box here is my server that's hosting the VM, and this is remoted into the VM. So from here you can do virtually anything that you would do with any other machine. You can run applications, you can install stuff, and so it's great if you have some legacy equipment that's kind of hanging out there, or legacy software that needs an older operating system. This is a great alternative to that, because then you can still access the software without having to have older operating systems hanging around on your network. So it allows you a little more security and flexibility. So that's it for this video. If you found it useful, please give me the thumbs up. If you have any questions or comments, post them below and I'll get them answered as best I can. If you want to see any more of these tutorials, also post that below or send me a message, and I will see what I can do about getting a video put together for it. Other than that, we'll see you next time.